All right, hello. This isn't going to last very long, so that's the first thing to say. This isn't going to last very long because who wants to sit and listen to me ramble about the budget for ages? And also, I'm going to a gig tonight, so I've got other stuff to do. But I just thought it was worth taking a minute to have a little chat about the budget and just sort of run through some of the things. I think it's kind of interesting because it's kind of not interesting, if that makes any sort of sense. And it's interesting because it's not interesting, because if you separate the little rabbit at the hat about tax, which we'll come to in a second, then actually there's almost nothing in the budget this year. There's almost nothing here. When you're announcing things like money for potholes, I'm not saying potholes aren't important, potholes are important, but when you're announcing money to fix potholes as a big thing in the budget, or money to fix village halls as a big thing in the budget, that's because you haven't got very much to announce. And Philip Hammond said this right at the beginning when he said, if there's a no-deal Brexit, chuck this budget in the bin, start all over again. So this is only a useful budget if we get a deal on Brexit. And let's be honest, at the moment, that doesn't seem all that likely. Now, let's deal with the rabbit in the hat at the end, because poor old Philip Hammond, who, as he pointed out, people have said time and time again, every time he does a budget, this is your last budget. And this was his last budget. Whatever happens, this was his last budget, unless he has to do an emergency one the day after Brexit or something similar. Poor old Philip Hammond boxed in here. Theresa May's already announced the extra money for the NHS. They've already leaked the extra money for mental health. He hasn't got that much exciting that he can actually announce today. But what he could announce was that big change in the tax threshold. So the promise in the manifesto to raise the amount you can earn before you pay tax, which was going to go up to £12,500 for everybody, £50,000 if you're a higher rate taxpayer. Now that was supposed to happen by 2020. It's actually going to happen in April next year. Now, that's a tax cut for 30 odd million people, which is a headache if you're the Labour Party. How do you argue against a tax cut for 32 million people? That's quite a difficult thing to say. Worth pointing out that the richest 10% of people will gain about £400, £500 a year out of it. The average taxpayer, the person in the middle, about 130 quid. People down the bottom, almost nothing. That's dealt with by raising the minimum wage, or the living wage as people insist on calling it now. That's dealt with by raising that by about 5%. So that's a decent-ish rise in what is a very low wage. But they're hard things for the Labour Party to argue against. And one of the things that is interesting about this overall not that interesting budget is that he's nicked a lot of things off the Labour Party, like giving up on PFI contracts. Here's a Tory Chancellor saying, I will never sign a private finance contract for a major infrastructure project. I will never sign a PFI contract. The slight problem with that is that two people who've been against private finance contracts since Gordon Brown bought them in 21 years ago were Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonnell. So Philip Hammond has kind of embraced a policy of people he would view as being of the hard left, which is slightly tricky. So look, the tax threshold thing, that's money in your pocket. You're probably very happy about that. You may feel less happy if you feel, for example, that people in Universal Credit aren't getting enough support. He announced an extra £1 billion for Universal Credit now, more than £1 billion extra to try and ease the impact of Universal Credit on other people. You might be happy about the tax cut that you've just been given. You might think it's not the fairest thing to do. That's a good headline grabber because it sounds a bit like you're saying, look, everybody, austerity's over, everyone gets a tax cut. Even if we leave on a no-deal Brexit, money for you in your pocket, £130. Come on, £130, come on. That's good money. That all sounds lovely. Apart from that, though, what was in here? What was, as I mentioned a moment ago, potholes. Money to take on potholes. It's important. It's not the most important thing in the world. He started talking about business rate relief for public toilets. This is not the stuff to set hearts on fire. There was extra money for mental health services, which people will welcome. There was extra money too for the NHS. There was extra money for schools, though I think a lot of teachers would say that that was a bit of a drop in the ocean compared to the money they actually needed. And there was extra money for defence. But in all of those things, as welcome as they will be by campaigners in those areas, these were sticking plasters. These were bits of money to get through the immediate crisis that the government currently has to deal with. So in schools, there's a massive cash crisis. The MOD is running out of cash and needs money to get through the next couple of years. This money is supposed to get you through that crisis over that kind of bump of the immediate point of Brexit. But there was no long-term vision, there was no long-term plan, there was no long-term sort of demarcation of what do the Tories see post-Brexit Britain looking like, and how does that differ from the post-Brexit vision that the Labour Party has set out? Because whether you like or dislike the Labour Party, like or dislike Jeremy Corbyn, he's setting out a coherent narrative about greater state control, about raising taxes and charges on the wealthy. There is a coherent narrative there that you can like or dislike. What there seems to be coming from Philip Hammond is a bit of money here and there to deal with immediate crises, not really any kind of vision. Now, that probably doesn't matter that much because, as we say, Philip Hammond's probably not going to be Chancellor this time next year. But it's interesting that in the end, when they had to come up with some way of saying to people, austerity is over, the good times are coming, all they could do was basically bung you £100 and hope that would tide you over for a bit. Anyway, few immediate thoughts. As I say, I'm going to gig tonight. David Byrne, very excited about it. I have this coffee to get through to get me through the rest of the evening. I put a bit too much caramel in that, to be honest. There'll be more on all of this in the next Party Games podcast. It will be with you later in the week. If, foolishly, you have never listened to it or subscribed to it before, you can at partygamespodcast.com. Anyway, I've got to get ready for my gig now. Bye-bye.